We don't yet have all the answers, but we do know that multiple people have been wounded, some gravely, in explosions at the Boston Marathon. But make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this, and we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this. Any responsible individuals, any responsible groups will feel the full weight of justice. Will feel the full weight of justice. Will feel the full weight of justice.
This time I wish to extend my condolences to the people of the United States of America and the families of those who live abroad who have been affected by the Boston Marathon bombings of April 15th, 2013. Some of the facts that we know so far is that there were 10 local hospitals that treated more than 170 people. 15 persons were injured and in critical condition, including 2 children. 3 died, including 2 females, one of whom was a student from China, and a boy of just 8 years old. At least 13 people who were injured suffered severed limbs. Many of the victims, they suffered lower leg injuries from shrapnel wounds, and others had ruptured eardrums. Some of the other more grisly details, we discovered that material taken from the victims included round pellets like BBs. There were also round ball-bearing pellets, a little larger than BBs, carpenter-type nails, and other metal pieces. As the president had said, these guilty parties are going to feel the full weight of justice. And it's this concept of justice that I want to take a look today and how it relates to a particular teaching in the Bible that we'll discuss briefly. Given the nature of this atrocity, the president's message was intended to bring hope and comfort to the people of America. It's only in the light of tragedies like this, when people commit injustice, that we can more fully appreciate the promise of hope and comfort from the idea of justice in its retributive aspect. Everyone who viewed the president's speech, including children, they understood, without even requiring proof, that when he promised that the transgressors would experience the full weight of justice, that this is a good thing. Justice is not a bad thing. And we all know what happens to child molesters and child killers in prison. Indeed, their very lives are threatened and in danger from the other prisoners around them. The other prisoners may be killers, drug dealers, robbers, thieves. Why is this so? It's because even the worst of the lawless still have a sense of justice. They still desire justice. They know that justice is good. They might be hypocrites, but they still have an innate sense of justice that is a link between them and the rest of humanity. Indeed, this link is a part of our human nature that we've been given because each of us has been created in the likeness and image of God. But we know that both the devil and men, they pervert this innate desire for justice for selfish ends. We know that many crimes that men are guilty of and they commit are the result of the desire for right and justice that has been perverted towards selfish ends. It's likely that the bombers themselves will justify themselves because they were under the influence of strong desires for retribution. These terrorists felt that justice must be paid, regardless of who pays it. It doesn't matter whether it's the guilty parties or the innocent parties. Now, whether there are actually guilty parties involved that the bombers wanted justice against, this is not an issue for vigilantes to decide in a civilized society. back to what the president had to say. So when President Obama promised the full weight of justice, who do you think he intended should suffer in order for justice to be satisfied? So let's look at this question a little closer. What does justice demand regarding the acts of evil perpetrated by the terrorists so that the people can enjoy good health, peace, and safety? Who does justice require payment from? Well, let's suppose for a moment that the president gave a slightly different message. What if he'd said, well, somebody has to pay. Doesn't matter if it's the guilty parties that did the bombings, as long as somebody pays. It could be the people that are guilty and deserving punishment, or it could be innocent people who are worthy and willing to be punished. Do you think that such a message is going to be either beneficial or comforting to the survivors of these bombings, or to their families, or to the people of Boston, or to the people of America as a whole? Think about that. Well, here's another question. Would you say that justice had been served if the criminals are no longer held legally accountable, but are acquitted on the grounds that other innocent and worthy and willing persons were punished in their place? What do you think of that? Wouldn't you say that that would be madness? Well, recently a YouTuber posted some odd comments to me concerning the nature and the purpose of the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. When we talk about Jesus' death on the cross, this is the subject of the atonement. Now, the atonement is God's means of bringing reconciliation between sinners and himself. So that's part of the good news. And as we look at this topic, we'll go into more detail about what the atonement is. But let's look a bit more at what it isn't. There are several different theories about the atonement, about what Jesus accomplished on the cross. And I'm familiar with a theory that this poster has brought forward. So I asked the question, if a person transgresses a law in any government, what does justice demand, or what must occur in order for justice to be satisfied? Then this poster replied to me, and he replied 5 times, giving the same answer, so that it doesn't leave any of us any doubt as to what his position is on this. The YouTube poster claimed that justice requires either the punishment of the transgressor or the punishment of someone who is innocent and worthy and willing to suffer that punishment. And then this poster called this an act of grace. I want to make this clear. He claims that Jesus was punished instead of us, instead of sinners, as an act of grace. He further clarified that God doesn't view the punishment of either the guilty or of the innocent substitute any different than the other. He says there are no gradations. God views it equal. Somebody has to pay the price. Justice has to be satisfied. So then I asked, well, if justice demands either the punishment of the transgressor or the punishment of a suitable substitute, then to pay one or the other would be, strictly speaking, an act of justice. So how is satisfying justice an act of grace? To do what justice demands regarding transgression can only and ever be an act of justice. How can doing what the satisfaction of justice requires be called an act of grace? Well, this poster, for a couple days, had been entirely silent. He's since come back on YouTube and he's posting again. But to this day, he has not answered and demonstrated that the satisfaction of justice consists in an act of grace. Grace, strictly speaking, is that which can be withheld without violating justice. In order for grace to be grace, it has to be something that justice cannot require. Do you see that? Well, who does God's justice demand payment from? We can suppose for a moment that God gave a message like the one we just looked at and says, well, somebody has to pay. Doesn't matter if it's the guilty party or whether it's even my own son who pays. As long as justice gets satisfied. That's all I care about. Justice has to get paid. As long as it gets paid, I'm happy and satisfied. I would think that even the people in Boston, if they're watching this right now, they themselves would consider such a message as sheer madness. Don't you? I do. Well, next time we're going to examine this concept of atonement in more detail. We're going to look at the concepts of propitiation and expiation. We're going to see what they mean and see which is a better translation as we examine more in depth the problems with the penal substitution theory that we've been looking at briefly today. And I want you to stay tuned to this series because your very understanding of what the atonement is may have serious eternal consequences because we're all going to die, you and I. And the moment that you breathe your last breath, it's either going to be one where you enter into eternal bliss with God, or it's going to be one of eternal regret and torment and agony. And your eternal destiny may hinge on your understanding of what the cross teaches. So I want to thank you today for stopping in this special episode of Search the Scripture. So stop in next time and subscribe.